All right, this video is going to go over the parabola. So there's a lot to know about parabolas, but I will say probably the most important thing right from the start is you better know the difference between these two equations. And why this is so important is because you're going to be looking for the letter that has the square in order to find out if that parabola is vertical or horizontal, okay? So like, for example, if you saw an equation like this, like number 5, it says y squared equals negative 4x. Well, the y has the square. So that means this is going to be a horizontal parabola. So it's going to open either to the left or to the right like that. And so the way you know also which way it opens, if you have a x squared with a positive p-value, it's going to open up. If you have an x squared with a negative p-value, it's going to open down. If you have a y squared with a positive p-value, it's going to open to the right. And if you have a y squared with a negative p-value, it's going to open to the left. So that's where I would start with parabolas. You really need to know this right here. Also, another thing to know is that the p-value, this p-value, it's the distance to your focus, this distance, whatever it is. So it's also the distance to your directrix. And when I say distance to, I'm talking in terms of where the vertex of that parabola is. All right, so if the distance to your focus is 2, then the distance to this directrix is 2, okay? You should kind of have a decent background of that already from Algebra 2, but let's go ahead and dive into some of these problems. If I saw like number 5 and they want me to match it to like one of these pictures, the first thing I'd realize is it's a y squared. So that means it's going to open left or right. So all these vertical ones, they're out. And so now I would look at, okay, it's a negative 4x. That means my p-value, if it says negative 4x, the equation by default is 4 times p, meaning whatever number's here, you have to divide by 4. So it'd look like 4 times negative 1, then x. This negative 1 would be your p-value. So that means it's a negative y squared. It's got to open to the left. So this guy's out. So it's one of these two problems. And in terms of which one of these it would be, if it's just a negative 1 p-value, it's not much of a stretch or anything or a compression. It's going to be E. So the oppo of that, like which one this guy would be, F, would be, let me do it in a different color. F would be like this one, because you would be like, okay, I have negative 12x, divide that by 4, you would get 4 times negative 3. See how this p-value now is negative 3? That means to the focus, it's going to be 3, not just 1 like it was here. So it's going to open it up, kind of. I hope that made sense. All right, so some more examples of this. If I saw like one like number 9, I'd realize it's a y squared. So that means it's horizontal. Oh, I erased some of my words there. Let me do this again. Try to keep everything nice and neat. All right, so I'm on like number 9. I'm not going to do all these problems, by the way. I'm just going to jump around. All right, if I was on number 9, I'd realize, first of all, it's a y squared. So it's got to open left or right. So these up downs, they're gone. And then I'd be like, okay, the p-value is positive 1. I know that because I take this 4 and I divide it by 4. So it's really like 4 times 1, with 1 being the p-value. It means it opens to the right. These both open left, so it would have to be this one. But also another thing to think about is you can also get the vertex of the parabola from this equation. You just change these numbers after the x and the y. So the one after the x is your h. This is h, and then the one after the y is your k. So the hk here would be 3, 1. That would be your vertex. And you see in this picture 3, 1, it is your vertex. So that's just another thing to kind of think about. Okay, one more real quick, then we'll move on to a different part of this worksheet. Imagine like number 10. It's an x squared, so it opens up or down. And then I look at this -2 and I divide it by 4. So it's like 4 times -1/2. That means my p-value is -1/2. That means it's got to open down. So it can't open up, it can't open right, it can't open left, can't open left. So it's got to be one of these two. Now, which one of them? I would look at the equation and be like, okay, my hk would be -3 comma +1. -3, 1, hk. My answer would be C. So that's kind of how you do that matching. It's not too bad. Let's move on. All right. In these next ones, they want you to find the vertex, focus, directrix, the parabola, and sketch the graph. So they want a lot of stuff. If I was approaching these problems and I saw like we'll just start with number 11, y equals 1/2 x squared. You want to generally put the square on the left side just to make it match like these equations here. See how the squares are always on the left on those? So like I would rewrite this to be 1/2 x squared equals y. That would be the first thing I do. Now the next thing I would do is I would realize that the square is generally by itself. So like this 1/2, it's not helping me. It's hurting me. So I need to move it to the other side by timesing by 2. So you really get x squared equals 2y. Now, where I'd go from here is I would, just like before, take this number in front of the y, 2, and divide it by 4 to get my p-value. So you could really think of this problem as like x squared equals 4 times 1/2 parentheses y. You have to be able to rewrite it like that. And so once I knew this, I'd be like, okay, there are no shifts for h or for k. That means my vertex is 0, 0. It opens up. I know that because it's an x squared, meaning it is vertical. And my p-value is positive 1/2. So it has to open up. And then in terms of, we found our vertex, it was 0, 0. They want the focus and the directrix as well. So if you know your p-value was 1/2, that means it's going to be a distance of 1/2 to that focus. So this is here's 1, here's 1/2. So that means the focus for this would be at 0, 1/2. And the other way, so below it is the directrix. So here's -1. It's at -1/2. It's that same distance. This pink distance is the same as this orange distance. That's what I'm trying to tell you. All right, so that puts my directrix. It would be a horizontal line, which means it's a y equals line. And it's at -1/2. So that's how I would have answered that problem. That one was really easy because our vertex was 0, 0. So the equation was real easy to figure everything out, I mean. Okay, let's look at another one. Let's look at like a tougher one, like number 17. You got x minus 1 squared. Oops, it's not equal. It's plus 8y plus 2 equals 0. Okay, similar to the last problem, I'm going to try to get this x minus 1 squared by itself. See how it's by itself in the default equations? Which means you need to subtract 8y plus 2. So you could really rewrite this problem as x minus 1 squared equals -8 y plus 2. That would be my first move. Now, my next move from here is a very important one, and it is to go get the p-value. So I take this -8 off to the side, and I divide it by 4 to get the p-value. So I can rewrite this problem as like x minus 1 squared equals 4 times negative 2 y plus 2. Just like that. And now I'm ready to rock and roll in terms of graphing it, in terms of finding focus directrix. I would first go find my vertex from my h and my k, which puts my vertex at 1 comma negative 2. So it's like here. And then I'd be like, okay, my p-value is negative 2, right? That means this parabola, since it's x squared, it's vertical, with a negative p-value has to open downward like this. And then I would be thinking to myself, okay, if this was 1 and this is negative 2, and your p-value is negative 2, that means you're going to go 2 more down to get to your focus. Your focus is always like on the inside of that parabola. So that puts the focus at 1, negative 4. And then I go the opposite way to find the directrix. You can't really see it here, but it would be on this axis right here. So that puts my directrix. It's a horizontal line, which means it's y equals, and it's just at a value of 0. So that's how I would have done that problem. Okay, let's do one that's horizontal, and then we'll move on to a new section. Let's do like number, see when I say let's do one that's horizontal, I'm looking for something with a y squared. So like I look at these equations and I'm looking for one that has y squared. So like number 23, for example. I don't know why all this stuff just popped back up. I'm gonna have to rewrite those equations up there, aren't I? Okay, quick timeout. Okay, time back in, and it's like magic, it's fixed. Awesome. Let's hope the undo button keeps working. That way I don't have to rewrite it. All right, so let's look at like number 23. So we've got y squared plus 6y plus 8x plus 25 equals 0. Now, the reason this problem is going to be really rough is because you're going to have to complete the square. So here's what I mean. You have to take this y squared plus 6y, and you have to complete the square, which means you have to call it y plus 3 squared. So if you FOILed this out, you would get y squared plus 3y plus 3y plus 9. So really it's like y squared, y squared, and then it's like plus 6y, but then you have this random plus 9 at the end. You can't just add 9 to an equation out of nowhere. So on the outside here, you have to subtract that 9 to counteract it. This right here is the exact same thing as this right here. You just have to imagine if you FOILed it out, it would be the same thing. And so then you'd still have your plus 8x plus 25. And by the way, you should have a decent idea of how to complete the square from Algebra 2 anyways. So, all right, from here, I would group stuff. I'd call it y plus 3 squared. And then I'd have my plus 8x. And then I've got minus 9 plus 25 is plus 16 equals 0. All right, and similar to before, I'm going to try to isolate that square. So I'm going to move all this stuff to the other side. So it'd look like this. Y plus 3 squared equals negative 8x minus 16. Okay, now the next move is going to try to make this part of it look like this part of it. So what that means is you have to GCF out because you just want 1x right there. So it would look like this. Y plus 3 squared equals, I'm going to GCF a negative 8 out, which makes it x plus 2 on the inside. Whenever I do a GCF, I imagine if I redistribute, if I get back to my original. Okay, and then the last section, or the last thing to do here is take this negative 8 off to the side and divide it by 4 so you can get your p-value of negative 2. So this problem is really y plus 3 squared equals 4 times negative 2 x plus 2. And now if they wanted to graph it or know any attributes about it, the first thing I would get is my HK, my vertex. So the H is always by the letter X. Don't be the person who calls this -3 your H. That's not it. -3 is going to be the K. So your HK is -2, -3. It's like here. So -1, 2, -1, 2, 3. There we go. Now your p-value is negative. So that means, remember, we're on a horizontal. I know it's horizontal because the y has the square. That means this graph is going to open to the left because it has that negative p-value, like that. So in terms of finding the focus, you would go 2 to the left of that vertex because it's -2 p-value. So that puts it at -4, -3. And in terms of finding the directrix, I don't know why I put a parentheses there. You go the opposite way. So you go 2 to the right, and it would be a vertical line this time. You can't really see it again because it's on the axis, but it's right there. So since it's a vertical line, that's x equals, not y equals anymore. It's x equals 0. So that was a hard problem because you had to complete the square and do a bunch of other stuff. So hope that wasn't too confusing. If you're not sure how to complete the square, you need to go watch a video on that. Maybe I'll make one. Let's keep moving. Now we're going to jump to some of these where they tell me just some attributes about it, like a focus or a directrix. Now, so I'm like on this section right here. Now, the nice thing about this section is they tell me the vertex is the origin. That makes everything super easy because you can just be like, okay, h is 0 and k is 0. So all your equations are just going to be like y squared equals 4p parentheses x. So you really only care about like finding your p-value, for example. So that's going to be a little nicer, but you still have to know about these attributes. So here's what I mean. If I was on 31 and they told me I have a focus at 0, -3/2. Okay, well, I know my vertex is at 0, 0 because they just told me that. And then they tell me my focus is at 0, -3/2. That's -1.5. So that would put a focus here. This is your focus, which tells you a ton of information actually, because now you know that the parabola has to open down. It has to wrap around that focus. And if it's 1.5 down, that means it's 1.5 up to my directrix. So like here's 1, here's 2, it's 1.5. It's smack dab in the middle there. Because remember, this distance has to be, orange has to be the same as pink distance. So, okay, what are they asking for in this problem? When I look at this problem, I see they want the standard form equation. So how you're going to get that is first identify which equation you should use, whether it's vertical or horizontal. This is a vertical parabola. So that means it's going to be this x minus h squared. So I would just write that equation down. X minus h squared equals 4p y minus k. And you know your HK is 0, 0, which means you can just instantly be like, okay, it's x squared equals 4p parentheses y. And so now to get this equation in standard form, really all you need is this p-value right here. And your p-value is just this orange distance. It's 1/2. But since this parabola is opening down, you need to realize that it's a negative. And I said 1/2 earlier, it's 3/2, sorry. 3/2. So my p-value here is -3/2, like -1.5. So my answer here would be x squared equals 4 times that p-value of -3/2 and then the letter y. And then you just got to simplify it a little bit. So you'd be like, okay, x squared equals 4 times -3/2 is -6. So that would be my answer. So when the vertex of the parabola is at 0, 0, it makes the problem a lot easier to solve. Let's look at another. What if they just gave me a directrix? So let's look at like number 38. We know our vertex is at 0, 0. Cool. Now they tell me the directrix x equals -3. Well, that's a vertical line at -3. It's here. Means this distance is 3. Okay? And so just by knowing that, I know that this parabola would have to open to the right because the parabola cannot touch that directrix. So like if you open it any other direction, like down, well, then you just hit the directrix. It doesn't work like that. So that means it has to open to the right. And if I know the distance from that directrix to the focus is 3, that means the distance to, directrix to the vertex is 3. It means the distance from the vertex to the directrix is also 3. So that puts my focus at 3, 0. I think I got some of my words mixed up there. It's been a long day. All right. So I know that since it opens to the right, your p-value is positive, and that distance from vertex to focus is 3. So that makes my p-value positive 3. So now I can just write my equation down. Be careful, this time now we're using the horizontal equation. So it'd look like this. Y minus k squared equals 4p x minus h. But like we said earlier, we know h and k are both 0, 0. So you can just narrow this down to be y squared equals 4p x. Then you just plug in this p-value of 3 and you'd get y squared equals 4 times 3 parentheses x, which is just y squared equals 12x. That would be my answer. So those aren't too bad if the vertex is at 0, 0. Now, if the vertex is not at 0, 0, it's a different ball game, but they're not that bad either. So let's see if we can find one of those. But by now, you should at least have a good understanding of the basics of a parabola. So let's jump to this other page that I screenshotted. They want the equation. Let's do one of these pictures first. Let's do like number 41. It's a decent one. They want the equation of this parabola just from the picture. So if I was approaching this problem, the very first thing I would see is 3, 1. And then I'd realize that this is a vertical parabola opening down. So I'd write down the equation for vertical parabola. And with that HK being 3, 1, I would plug that in. So just bear with me. I'm leaving a little gap there to fill it back in. Okay. H was 3, which means my equation I need to write -3. K was 1, which means my equation I need to write -1. So this is where I would be so far. Now, the problem that's going to happen is we do not know the p-value. That's a problem for us. But what they did give us were some xy coordinates, like 4, 0. You're allowed to plug those in for x and y and then solve for p. So it'd look like this. Okay, I just changed x and y to 4, 0. And I could have used 2, 0. It wouldn't have mattered. But now you just got to do a little bit of algebra. So 4 minus 3 is 1. Squared is 1. So on the left, it just turns into 1. 4p times 0 minus 1. 0 minus 1 is -1. So when you times it by that 4p, you got -4p. Then you just got to divide by -4. And you end up with p equals -1/4. This isn't your answer, though. This is just a super important piece of information. For your answer, you need to go back to this equation right here when you plugged in your HK, and then just go replace that p-value. So it'd look like this. You want HK in this final answer equation. You're going to replace this p-value with -1/4. So now I'm here. And then I just got to multiply this part out right here. So my final answer would be x minus 3 squared equals 4 times -1/4 is -1. This is what my answer would look like. So they're not that bad. First, you plug in your HK, your vertex. Then you plug in your XY. Then you do a little algebra to solve for P. Then you go back to your vertex equation and plug it back into P value and do a little math and get your simplified answer. So let's do one just from like the words. Let's look at like, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. Let's look at 48. They tell me I have a vertex of -2, 1 and a directrix x equals 1. So to me, just reading those words, it doesn't mean that much to me yet. It doesn't mean much to me until I throw it on a graph and I see it visually. So like, I know I have a vertex here. It's at -2, -1. That means my h is -2 and my k is 1. And then the directrix, x equals 1 is a vertical line. So that would be here. So just by putting this on the graph, now it makes total sense to me. I have a parabola that's opening left. I have this distance right here. This distance is the p-value. So that's a distance of 3, but since my parabola is opening left, that means my p-value is -3, which would put my focus like here or something at -5. But I don't even need to know that. So I'm just going to go find my horizontal parabola equation, copy it down. And then just plug in my HK. And p-value. So it'd look like this. Y minus k, so y minus 1 squared equals 4p, so 4 times -3, x minus h. H is -2, so you need to write x plus 2. So my final answer here would be y minus 1 squared equals -12, x plus 2. So that one's not that bad. Now, the worst case scenario for you on that one is probably if they give you just like a focus and a directrix, like the next one. That's when these can get a little kind of tricky, but they're still, in my opinion, not that bad overall. So let's look at like number 49. No, that's going to be another horizontal. Let's go to 50. Number 50, if I approached it, 50's going to, yeah, okay, 50's going to work. I would throw it onto the graph before I even try to do anything. So I have a focus here at 0, 0. Not a vertex, a focus. I have a directrix at y equals 8. That's a horizontal line at 8. You need to realize that your vertex is going to be smack dab in the middle of these, which puts it at a point 0, 4. So the 0, 4 is my HK. And since I know these dots, like the parabola would have to open down around that focus. So I know it's a vertical parabola. So I write down my vertical parabola equation. I know that this orange distance here is my p-value, and it is down 4. So p is -4. Don't drop that negative sign. It's really important that you recognize p is -4, not +4. So I know my p-value. I know my hk. All I have to do is go plug them in. So x minus h, that would just be x minus 0, or just x squared, equals 4p, so 4 times -4, y minus k. K is 4, so y minus 4. Then just clean it up a little bit. You would get x squared equals -16, parentheses, y minus 4. So even the worst case scenario parabolas are not that bad. All right, so this video is just about done, but I'm not going to go over any tangent lines. But I will go over one of these. I don't know if it's really that important for you or not, but let's see what it's looking for. You've got y plus 1 squared equals 2x minus 4. And they want you to basically rewrite this equation. And really, okay, look, the wording here is really confusing. You're basically going to have to rewrite this equation into just a y equals, not a y squared equals. And so you'll end up with like this square root, and then you'll have to decide if you want like the upper or lower half of the parabola. Let me show you what I mean. You need to distribute the two because you can't square root this thing until you have done that. So you get 2x minus 4, sorry, 8. Now you root it. So you end up with y plus 1 equals plus minus this 2x minus 8 under a root. Then you subtract 1. So, because you're trying to get y equals by itself. So you know you have plus minus root 2x minus 8 minus 1. All right. Then you kind of have to go back to algebra 2 and transformations. If you graphed this, you would have like a shift right 4, not 8 because this 2, and then down 1. So it'd be like at 4, negative 1. The plus minus means you could either have this or this. Well, if they want the lower half of the parabola, they would just want this part. That would be the negative version of this. So to rewrite this equation, to make it just the lower half of the parabola, it would just be the negative root 2x minus 8 minus 1. I know a lot of you are probably sitting there wondering what I just did. Well, all I'm doing is rewriting this equation into this equation and basically deciding if I want the plus version of it or the minus version of it. If they say lower half, I want the bottom. If they say upper half, I would have taken the plus. So anyways, that's the basics of a parabola, and I hope this video helped.